We'll be starting in 1 minute, so if you would like to take some more starters hors d'oeuvre, please feel free to do so, and then we will begin. So, if I could draw everybody's attention, I think we're ready to start. We are already live streaming, so I just want to begin. We're waiting for one or two of our speakers, but we do have prayer and a few things to do before that, simply because it has been raining all week in Brisbane, for those of you who are not in Brisbane, and the traffic has suddenly got clogged. It is Patrick's Day. I just don't get it, but that's fine. And I do apologise to those who are streaming that this does not include you. I would invite you to go and get a drink and join us on this St. Patrick's evening, because here they do have drinks and food. Between the prayer and the main session, there will be the second course coming through so that we can eat, and they will serve us. So my role is simply at this moment to kickstart and to welcome you, to say good evening, and to welcome you to this event on Catholic women and leadership, an event we usually hold towards the end of the year but had to postpone last December for obvious reasons. It is one in a long line of evenings, events, programs and courses that the Faculty of Theology and Philosophy has created over the last few years to support what we would call theologically informed conversations about Catholic women in leadership. I'd like to recognise first and foremost Professor Jim Nyland, the Associate Vice-Chancellor for the Brisbane campus of ACU, who with his capable team also oversees this lovely venue and welcomes us here. Jim, to use his most loved football metaphor, is one of the biggest fans of this event and of the cause of this event. So we are sorry that he is not with us. He was meant to welcome us here, but Jim is not well. We hope not grave, but is not allowed out till Thursday. So Jim, if you are streaming in, we're sorry you're not here, and we pray for your recovery soon. Another member, I'm afraid, that is unwell. Isn't it funny? We got through a year of COVID, and now I think flu's hitting because it's not COVID, is my co-MC, Sophie, who was part of the team that ideated and if you want, birthed the theme for this evening. So I'm sorry she's not with us, but I'm sure she is in another way. So we also pray for you, Sophie. We timed this evening around International Women's Day, and it would seem our timing could not have been better. Across the country, and indeed the world, anger, which can be righteous and appropriate, against cultures of abuse or marginalisation or non-inclusion of women is once again showing its face, protesting embedded attitudes and cultures that run, it would seem, from schools through to Parliament. But as we all know, this is not new. We have been here before. In fact, we have got used to it. But it could and it should be otherwise. And I do not say this without hope. If I could quote a woman whose theology I'm currently working on, Rosemary Houghton, a mother of 10, founder of communities, theologian and prophet who spent her life serving those on the edge and writing about being Catholic, says this about women in Christianity, and I quote, "At a certain point, wisdom took flesh, became conscious, took decisions. Women in the early church had a new sense of themselves, and the men had this sense about the women. So they took on a new status and roles very quickly. But this did not last. It was one of those breakthroughs which comes too soon and cannot be assimilated into the rest of life. But things do not get lost. Truth does not get lost forever. If something is of the Spirit, it will return, it will resurface, it will reemerge. These gatherings are an attempt to scaffold that awareness, to channel the presence of the Spirit so that what women bring to the table can be heard, not to do the same again. The intuition, the conviction, and the hope is to learn new things about leadership. So the intention here is to open a space of conversation around what could happen, what at times has happened, what from a theological perspective is on the cards or written on the wall. But that needs conscious awareness and intelligent scaffolding to birth it through for the cultural change that we need. So here we are, to converse. A word on the title. This evening's theme and focus, Out in Front, was born from a group of young women in one of our programs, a graduate certificate in theology entitled Leadership for Mission, created by the faculty a few years ago in collaboration with what was then the ACB Office for Women and Catholic Mission and a few other organisations, but specifically created to promote women for leadership, young women for leadership. It was a program selected for inclusion on Vatican website for the Dicastery for Laity, Family and Life to promote best practices in lay formation. Two of our panel participants this evening are alumni of the first cohort. Their insight, this group of women that chose the theme, was and is that leadership today implies connectedness. And without overextending the generalization, that this is one of the gifts women tend to bring to the table. Connectedness, working together. Leadership is never solitary, but implies leading from the front, from the middle, and from the back. Let me rephrase. Effective, gospel-colored leadership is never solitary, and implies the awareness of and collaboration with the whole. To be out in front feels different when it is underpinned by that consciousness. So that's the theme we're breaking open this evening together. And I would welcome you to this space. I see faces of women and men who have been and are active in leadership in the church and beyond, and I thank you for your presence. I would thank Malcolm Hart, Director of the ACB National Centre for Evangelisation, with whom we continue to collaborate in this grad cert, Leadership for Mission with the next cohort. Thank you for being here. And I'm aware that Sharon and some of the past cohort and the present one are online, so we're grateful for your presence too. And welcome to all of you who are online. We hope you find this helpful. We hope in the future to open national and international spaces of research and practical support on this theme. And space is a useful metaphor. Here, physical and virtual, internal and shared. Space is also temporal, past, present, and future. And in that spirit, I'm delighted to welcome Jane Seelan, the Director of ACU's First People Centre, to acknowledge country for us. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everybody. My name is Jane Seelman, and I'm not from this country. I'm an Aboriginal woman from far north Queensland. My cultural connections are on my mother's side. We are Irukandji people of the Jabbergai language-speaking nation. And on my mother's father's side, we are Walgarookaba, Townsville area. This evening I'd like to acknowledge the Turrbal and Yagara peoples, traditional owners, keepers of the knowledge, custodians of the land, the seas and the waterways. This is very much a unique area. I pay respects to our elders, past and present, and our ancestors who have gone before us. I'm really proud to be here tonight, particularly women in leadership, Catholic women in leadership. I acknowledge the work, the friendship, the leadership of Auntie Joan Hendricks, who's gone before us. And I know that all of her daughters remind me regularly what a strong woman Auntie Joan was. Thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening. I also pay my respects to elders and other Aboriginal people who may be live streaming on the countries where they're from. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jane. And I'd like to thank and welcome Sister Ursula, who's going to lead us in prayer. I might preempt by saying we have here Macaulay and Wayne, and also Dan, who are going to help us with the musical side of this prayer as we begin.
Just a little note, when we're praying the Magnificat after the opening song, if people on my left could start with the first verse and the people on my right do the second, and we'll alternate. So we continue to gather and acknowledge and celebrate the presence of God amongst us.
Teach me to believe in the darkness, woman of faith. Teach me how to see the way to go, woman of old. Teach me how to love in the pain, woman of God. Knowing His love always remains ever the same. And may His will be done, woman of God. Come, show me how to pray, just as He did, woman of death. Show me how to lay my life for them, woman who loved. May I not be scared of the cross, woman of pain. Knowing His love always remains ever the same, and may His will be done, woman of God. As He lived, love each other as He loved onto a cross until the end. No, there's nothing that can keep you from His love. Do whatever He did, live as He lived, love each other as He loved onto a cross until the end. No, there's nothing that can keep you from His love. Come, teach us to believe in the darkness, woman of faith. Teach us how to see the way to go, woman who holds. of the cross, woman of pain, knowing his love always remains ever the same, and may his will be done. Woman of God, woman, woman, woman of God, woman, woman, woman of God.
We give thanks for God, for you always, remembering before our God your work of faith and labour of love. My soul proclaims your greatness, O my God, and my spirit rejoices in you, my Saviour. For you have looked with favour on my poverty. Surely from now on all generations will call me blessed. For you are God, done great things for me, and holy is your name. Your mercy is on those who fear you, from generation to generation. You have shown strength with your arm. You have scattered the proud in their heart's fantasy. You have brought down the powerful from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. You have filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away empty. You have helped your servant Israel and remembered your mercy. According to the promise you made to our ancestors, to Abraham and Sarah, mercy to their descendants forever. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. We give thanks for God, for you always, remembering before our God your work of faith and labour of love.
A reading from the book of Jeremiah. Now the word of God came to me, saying, Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, and before you were born, I consecrated you. I appointed you a prophet to the nations. Then I said, Lord God, truly I do not know how to speak, for I am only a child. But the Lord said to me, Do not say I am only a child, for you shall go to all to whom I send you, and you shall speak whatever I command you. Do not be afraid of them, for I am with you to deliver you, says your God. Then God reached out and touched my mouth and said to me, Now I have put my words into your mouth. See, today I appoint you over nations and over kingdoms, to pluck up and to pull down, to destroy and to overthrow, to build and to plant. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. And we pray together. God of all truth and goodness, bless us as we gather here at Australian Catholic University. May we be strengthened in mind and heart to pursue what you inspire, with insight and deliberation, that our world may advance in true wisdom and justice for all, through Christ our Lord. Amen.
So to finish our prayer, we're going to sing a song which you probably won't have heard before, so you may not be able to join in. But it is an attempt to pray in line with the theme that we have today, so I invite you to pray with us as we sing. I'm just going to make sure the two guitars are in the same tone. Perfect. We've been playing with tones. Thank you, Ursula. Thank you, our musicians. I believe as we move into the next stage, which is our panel, you are going to get fed a little bit more, so perhaps we could open the door. And am I wrong, but the air conditioning might need a little boost? Perhaps. Thank you. I think they're coming in now. So just while I begin this next part, I am aware, probably if we weren't streaming, we would leave a little bit of a break, but I'll begin to introduce at least so we know what's happening as So, as I said before, this evening aims to name the fact that when we are out in front, we are never there alone. There are people, men and women, in the center and bringing up the rear of our journey, without whom we would never be where we are, and what is more, we need each other. Leadership implies collaboration and mutual support. So we wish to showcase this by bringing together first, women who have long been at the forefront of leadership, men who can lead also because of the women who have marked them in their lives, and women who are beginning their journey and need mentoring and to mentor, and who are handing over the baton of learning to the next cohort of Leadership for Mission. So in that sense, our first speaker that I would like to introduce is Margaret Vider. If you'd like to come up as I call you, that would be lovely. Margaret's background, Margaret will be known to some of the people in the room, but her background is in nursing and hospital administration for a 40-year period during which she was a member of hospital and aged care boards, as well as the governing body of the National Catholic Health and Aged Care Association in Canberra. Since retiring, if we could call it that, 13 years ago, she has also been involved with a number of archdiocesan entities, including Centacare and the Archdiocesan Finance Council, and I might add the Archdiocesan Plenary Council Task Force. So welcome, Margaret. Father Anthony Mellor. Father Anthony, did they mic you? They have. You're all prepared. Well done. Father Anthony is a priest of the Archdiocese of Brisbane, ordained in 1997. He has served in a number of parishes, as well as completing studies in Rome and at ACU. Anthony is currently Dean of the Cathedral, as well as serving as Academic Dean at Holy Spirit Seminary and as Theological Advisor to Brisbane Catholic Education. Welcome, Anthony. And then we have two women beginning their journey. So first we have Natalia, if you'd like to come to the... Natalia has a commerce degree with a professional background in accounting and finance. Currently, she works as a cost analyst in property development. In the past, she has worked with bank, unit registry, wealth management, and real estate. Currently, she studies a Master of Philosophy at the Australian Centre for Philanthropy and Non-Profit Studies at QUT Business School. She has always felt drawn to the intersection of commerce, faith, and mission. So Natalia is co-founder of an organization called The Water Jars, a movement to fund non-profit organizations with a focus on community development. Since its inception in 2015, The Water Jars helps to distribute over $300,000 to projects relating to health, education, and youth. She also serves on the board of directors for Entrust Foundation. She does martial arts and loves music. In case there was anything missing, welcome, Natalia. And beaming in from Darwin, we have Sarah McGuire, who will take her seat as soon as she hears me. There's a slight lag. So Sarah, if you'd like, there she goes. Welcome. Sarah is another one of the graduates of our grad cert in theology, is an occupational therapist working in community disability in the Northern Territory, in both Darwin and remote Arnhem Land. Along with a passion for rural and remote health, her faith also inspires her work. As a graduate of the Leadership for Mission program, it has helped her develop an understanding of her faith and how it links so closely to everyday work. So welcome, Sarah. Could you welcome our panel, please? So I wonder, I'm going to presume the mics are all on. Could we check? Do a mic check? Sarah, why don't you say hello first? Because I think yours will be on.
Is mine on?
Hello.
Wonderful. So I have sent them a few questions. What we're going to do in this first moment is, if you like listening to them around a few questions, then we will open it to Q&A around the room. There's a bit of a reverb. Huh? Is that because Okay, so sorry, if you could mute when I'm not talking to you, that would be a better idea. Well, we know they work. Test accomplished. Thank you for that. And they know how to turn them on and off, so that's also a good thing. Okay, so there are a series of questions we're going to run through with them, and then we will open, at least here, with a Q&A. So the first one would simply be, would you like to present yourself? So Sarah, I will start with you, just because then they're going to take turns. I have introduced you a little bit. Would you just like to say something brief about yourself in this context? Thank you.
Thanks, Maeve, and thank you everyone for the opportunity to be here tonight. I actually couldn't be there today. I've just have a 3-week-old baby girl at home, so to travel to Brisbane is a little bit further for me to get to at the moment, but I'm very grateful for the opportunity to zoom in. So as Maeve said, I'm an occupational therapist up in Darwin and work in remote practice. but I also have been a past participant of the Leadership for Mission program run through ACU. And I guess I just wanted to kind of give you my take-home message that really stood out for me during that program. And being a strong feminist going into the course, that I had already an awareness of the gender inequality that we have in the world. But one thing that I really was highlighted to me throughout the Leadership for Mission course was, in particular, the gender inequality within the church, where I guess it highlighted to me that we're losing half our perspective, I guess, in our church with the absence of women's voices in leadership. And this was something that I really took away, in particular when we had a unit in theological studies where we're unpacking the gospel messages and thinking of it from the context of a women's perspective and the women's lived experience through the gospel. And that was something in reflection that when you unpack how, I guess the church today, a lot of our leadership and a lot of, even right down to parish life and the homilies that we receive on the weekend, there's a gap there in between a women's perspective and other voices in the church as well. So it was something that I really found very valuable and learnt a lot in terms of feminist theology.
Thank you, Sarah. Mark, would you like to say something about yourself?
As Maeve said, my background and working life was mainly in nursing. And the strange thing about that is it was a female-dominated profession. So when we would be introducing or interviewing male applicants for positions, it was always necessary to say to them, you realise that you're coming into a predominantly female workforce and you will have female bosses. Have you thought your way through that? And for some of them, mostly they said yes, they had thought their way through that and they didn't think they'd have any trouble. And my response was always, well, they're no pushover, so you'll have to be up to the task. My purpose for being here tonight is to focus on leadership. And throughout my career, I had many opportunities to be in leadership roles. And I would say to you, if you get the opportunity to move into leadership roles, take it. Now, leadership roles doesn't mean that you start at the top. Leadership roles would mean that you will go on to committees. If you have an opportunity to chair a committee, take it. You will learn, but know a bit about yourself before you allow yourself to go forward. So you do need to sit and reflect. You've got a lot of study that underpins what you're currently doing. So select the bits that you want to take that apply to you, know who you are, know the model of leadership that suits you, and somewhere along the line, coming out of a Catholic gospel-based tradition, it will come with a servant leadership model, servant, not subservient. It will come with a servant model of leadership or a person-centred model of leadership, but it will be connected to people, and it will be in that role that you will take it on. But you will learn a lot by the structure and the movement of being with people. You learn a lot about how to manage people, and you learn a lot about the other part, because at that level you learn to make policy decisions, big decisions sometimes. And the two things you need to take in with you as basic concepts are who are the people involved in this organisation and what's its purpose. And the rest you can dress as you go along. But be clear on that. That's probably enough about me for now.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Absolutely. Anthony, would you like to just introduce? I've said something. Would you like to add anything to what I've said? About
Thanks,
being...
Maeve. I've already learnt one lesson tonight, which is stay on mute unless you're being spoken to. And I'll take that beyond tonight as well.
I've always known that about you, Anthony.
It's good to be here with you. I'm under no illusion that as a male in the church, as a priest in the church, that any leadership position I have is probably not based on my skill, but based on the pool of options that are around at any given time. So in another time, in another era, I may not have ended up Dean of the Cathedral an academic dean. It's the church as it is, in the way it fills certain functions and roles, relies on a model of celibate leadership. So in terms of my own sense of what I offer in terms of leadership, it's under no illusion that I have any particular skill, other than to say that along the way I've learned a lot from all sorts of people in all sorts of situations, in all sorts of circumstances, and continued to learn. And this word discipleship basically just means that we are learners. And for me, one of the keys to leadership is listening and learning and continuing to draw on the skills and the vision of the people around you, because certainly in my case, if I don't do that, it's a fairly limited skill set and a fairly limited vision. And so the collective is very important to me. And that's drawing on the skills of males and females across the board in all sorts of situations and circumstances. So for me, that sense of continuing to learn from the collective and work with the collective is important and necessary, certainly for me anyway.
Thanks, Anthony. And we were very aware when we were preparing this, as each of the events, that we have never planned these events only for women to talk about women, but to come together to talk about this theme. I'm aware it can be daunting to be invited to speak on a panel such as this, so we are grateful.
I will stay on mute until I'm spoken.
Wonderful. This is why I asked you. No. Natalia, would you like to say something about yourself?
Yes. So, thank you. I am a daughter, the eldest of two sisters, and I'm a migrant. I came here when I was 17 years old, and that's a long time ago. And I am the ever grateful recipient of the Scholarship for Leadership for Mission, the graduate certificate course in theological studies. That is the ACBC initiative in collaborations with the ASU. So Maeve here was my lecturer. I survived her class.
She excelled.
That's why I'm here today, and I have Dr. Janine Latik as well somewhere in the Zoom. So I'm very fortunate to be in the company of experienced, kind-hearted, generous women around me, and I think that is my takeaway moment for my leadership. I learned from these modules, and along the way I have them to fall back onto, to consult and seek advice. Thank you.
Thanks, Natalia. And just to mention, Janine, myself, Gemma Cruz and Tony Pesci were the four women who sat down with Dermot Nestor and with people from the ACBC to create this course. And I will say, for all of us, it was one of those moments where you open a space and you think, gosh, this is learning. It was a beautiful experience, and one of the ones that impulses this evening. So it's great to have you and Sarah with us this evening. So moving on, the next question we asked them was about women who had influenced them. Have there been other? Obviously, you're in leadership roles, even if initially you're in leadership roles, but what women have influenced you and how as you moved through? And I might start again with you, Sarah, if that's okay. Thank you.
Yep. So hi everyone again. When I was reflecting on this question, there were so many women that came to mind that I've seen amazing leadership from within my own life, especially, growing up with amazing women around me. It's included, I know in particular, I'll just name a few, and then there's one in particular I really want to highlight. There was, in particular, I know for me, my high school principal, she really demonstrated the epitome of what I see as a servant leader. And she's someone that I still look up to today, and she inspires me in the work that she does and how she serves others. And as there was a mention earlier about that servant leadership rather than a subservient leader. She's definitely a true servant leader. And then there's also reflecting on looking at my co-workers and in particular being an occupational therapist, also a very female-dominated profession, particularly working in a multidisciplinary setting. I know this is somewhere where I've seen leadership in that, I guess, collaborative model where people come together for that greater good, and you really see great outcomes come together when there's that collaborative model between allied health and medical professionals working together for client outcomes. But in particular, I really wanted to focus on tonight to share with you being an occupational therapist and working in remote Northern Territory, in particular in Indigenous communities, someone who I have really taken from, and in particular through my studies through the Leadership for Mission program, that I reflected a lot upon, trying to link in how my work and my faith and how that all comes together, and what leadership can I draw from to link the two together and inspire me in all those areas. In particular, throughout my studies and today in my work, I draw on and reflect on Dr. Miriam Rose. So in particular, when working in Indigenous communities, Miriam Rose, the spiritual practice of Didiri, so that, listening and still quietness and being present in a moment and reflecting, that's something that I've really taken that leadership model and practice to incorporate in my health professional career, but also as a reconciliation practice as well. So when I'm working in Indigenous communities and working with people who identify as Indigenous Australians, this is something that I always constantly have in the back of my mind as a way of respecting and understanding that connection to culture, to land and to sea, and something that I think can be so easily overlooked in the medical practices that we see in Western society, and just really having that in the back of my mind as a leadership example, it's been really inspirational and something that has brought great peace in my work and to my leadership in that area as well.
Thanks for that, Sarah. Now, we may not always go in order, but I do think there's a natural link there in the medical to you, Marg. Would you like to speak about the women that have influenced you?
Yes, there have been some women who have left their mark on me over the years, and not so much from the professional point of view. It's the way they've gone about it and their personal approach to things that have probably left an impression on me. The first one was my mother, and she was an extraordinary woman that had very different personality to me. She was a kind, gentle, loving person that accepted and loved everybody. And that was very meaningful, and became more meaningful the older I got. I could look back and cherish the attributes that she displayed that I thought I should emulate. The rest of the people that moved me have been nurses. I had a great friend who was 11 years older than me, who was in administration, and she worked in Sydney. And when I had finished my training, I moved into nursing education fairly quickly, and it was hospital-based still in those days. And I was on committees and things that helped move it from the hospital-based into the tertiary sector. That's going back quite a few years. It was in the late 70s. Some of you probably weren't even born. And when it moved in, it meant that hospital schools of nursing became places for students in the universities to come for their prac, but it changed. Anyway, I decided I'd go into administration. Well, I was asked, would I consider going into administration? And I did. But this friend of mine in Sydney, who was the Director of Nursing at the Prince of Wales Hospital in Randwick, a big hospital, she never had much time for nurse educators. She thought they were a bit academic and a bit 9 to 5-ish. And she said, there were 3 of us that were friends, and I was the youngest, so my nickname was Bub. And she said to me one day when I rang her and said, I'm going to go into administration, I'm going to go. and do a course at the college and then go into administration. She said, "What, you?" She said, "Well," she said, "you'll need to remember the day is not structured. If you were to have an open door," she said, "you'll go into your office in the morning and the work will be there for you to do that day. And because of what will happen, you'll go out of that office at night and won't have touched any of that work." And that really was very telling, because hospitals in acute care are very challenging. And we get challenged often on the daily things that come before us. You come into hospital, you walk into hospital, but sometimes you don't walk out. You go to the morgue. And that's really very, very taxing. It's life, but it's what you deal with. And not everything is dramatic as that, and that doesn't happen every day, but it does happen. And you really do need to be able to walk with people, and that's a challenge. And you have to be able to prioritise. So she taught me that. She said, just remember that. You will go to the office in the morning and you will go out at night, and what's on the desk has not been touched. It was a good lesson. And another one was a nun at Holy Spirit Hospital who actually employed me. She in those days was Sister Mary Gerard, but she reverted to her baptismal name and was Sister Maureen. And she was the most down-to-earth, practical nurse you could ever find. Nothing was ever a bother. She broke the rules easily, and she cared beautifully for people. They were always human beings, and she could accept them wherever they were at. If they were angry, if they saw her coming in a habit, you know, they'd say to her, "Get out, I don't want anything to do with God." And she'd ask them the cricket score. And before too much more had happened, you know, they were talking about the cricket, and God never got a mention on that particular conversation. She just had a lovely connection with human beings. It was a great model to follow, because it was necessary to be able to connect with all sorts of human beings. Many who were angry at God for why has this happened to them. So they were two that probably stand out for me, that left their mark on my interaction.
Thanks, Marg. Lots to think about there. Anthony, women in your life?
It's interesting. I wouldn't have said this way previously until I started thinking about this question for tonight. But in my own personal experience, what I have had to learn in life, or what has come innately, is probably relationship with women. What I have had to learn throughout my life is more relationship with men, and that's part of a personal history. In that, before I'm the youngest of five, and my mother was, my mother was 44 or something when I was born, and both my grandfathers had died before I was born. My uncle died when I was about 5 or 6. My father died when I was 11. So I hadn't really thought about it in that sense. That relationship with the women in my life has come much more naturally to me because of my mother and my mother's generation, who she grew up during the war, and her 2 other sisters and her brother were really part of that remarkable generation. And my mother and her 2 sisters, all very different, were exceptionally strong women. One of whom was a matron, and the other has gone through all sorts of ups and downs, and is the only one still living at the age of 93, I think. So what's become clear for me, and reflecting on that question, is that the thing that I've had to learn more throughout my life is relationship with men in different capacities and in different ways. And in fact, there have been portions of my life where that's been very intense, because I went to an all-boys secondary school, I went to a seminary, I lived in an all-male environment in Rome, I live in an all-male environment, for all of my priesthood. Certainly live in an all-male environment now. There All those dynamics I've had to negotiate much more in my own life than simple relating to women. I look around this room and I've had in various ways and connections with a number of women in this room who have all been a strong presence. I think it's from my perspective, I don't think there's not one particular gift or style that women bring to leadership. I think it's a whole range of things, and I think I've been lucky enough to have shared that journey. I look at Mel here, who's sitting right in front of me, who I've known since about 1990 something, 4 or 5. Yeah, who was my supervisor back in my pastoral year in Maroochydore. And I don't think I've ever said to Mel, but that was an incredibly important year in my life because I was different after that year in not a major way, just a kind of a cumulative way that life happens. But a lot of that was to do with the supervision that you gave me and helping me grow up. And I look at other people in the room here who have shared experiences with Terry, who we worked on the BC relationships, sex education relationship curriculum, which was all very interesting. But that would have been, working with men would have been an incredibly different experience. So on a personal note, I suppose I feel very fortunate that, and I suppose because it's come more easily to me, I've been much more open than I see some males in all sorts of walks of life, being open to the friendship and the gifts and just the simple accompaniment that women can offer, or do well.
Thanks, Anthony. It's funny, I've often reflected upon, I think I can sense in people that I work when they have sisters or when they've worked with women, but especially when they've had sisters before they tell me, I can usually tell, but I have not pulled that thread as you have now around the depth in which our relationships and our family relationships can affect then how we journey in ministry. So thank you for that. Natalia.
I have 2 role models in my life. My mom, and there's a trend here, everybody's mentioning mom, and also my grandmother from mom's side. So my mom is a person that always builds connections with everybody around her. She's a natural. She cares a lot about people, builds friendship everywhere she goes. So much so that when I go back for holiday and spend some time with her, when we go to a place to another, to a shopping center, for example, we would stop at so many different places. People come and greet her, and she would stop and say, "Oh, how is your neighbor? How is your?" And she'd remember all these people. Caring for people is what I learned from her, and I think it affects the way I position myself in my work and how I lead. That care of people is the key element, and that my mom showed me. Once she has great influence, great friendships with people, the better chance I feel that she can in leading and work together with these people. So that's what I try to do in my life. And my grandma is on a different way of leading. It's not all the gentleness, softness, all the feminine qualities, but also the feistiness and the take no nonsense approach. So my grandma has 8 kids, so she knows how to negotiate with all these people. But I remember not long ago, she's 85 years old now, and in Indonesia, the internet in her home broke down. And she has a very limited understanding on what a modem does and what cables plug into what. But instead of waiting around for one of my cousins or uncles to fix it, she was determined that she would fix it. And so she was on the phone with the internet provider for hours, trying to get the troubleshooting and the cables all worked out. And what a day for the internet provider to be called by an 85 years old and try to lead this woman to how to match which cable color to what. And she said over the phone that I am frustrated, but you gotta help me fix this thing. I am going to do whatever you say, but we gotta work together and get this done. And so that level of persistence is what she shows throughout her life, and I think I really admire that. And every time I come across difficult situations, I try to channel my grandmother fixing internet, and I feel better. Yeah.
Thank you, Natalia. Thank you, all of you. So we're going to take a step further. We're getting to know the background. We're seeing the people who have influenced you. And now we want to dive just a little bit into what leadership is for you. So the two questions that I posed them to think about were: name a light bulb moment in your leadership style. So a moment that has lit up, changed or not changed, but a light bulb moment in your leadership style, and something you would do differently if you had the option. Is it unfair to start again with you, Sarah? Is that okay?
That's okay. I'm happy to go. I'll start with the first question and then move on to the second question. So the first question there around sorry, Maeve, can you say the questions in the order again? So
absolutely. Name a light bulb moment in your leadership style. Then I'll come to the other one. You go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, when I was reflecting on this question, thinking of a light bulb moment, I found it really hard to pinpoint one particular moment that shaped my leadership style. And so it was in reflecting on it, the light bulb that I think came to me for leadership and what I guess good leadership is, came more so when I saw poor leadership. So probably a little bit of a twist around the question, but I guess for me, growing up, I had some really great examples of really good leadership, and I guess for me, I didn't really see that poor leadership come out till a little bit later in life, and it was in those moments I kind of had that aha moment in saying, okay, well, this isn't right, where I had experienced people, I guess, being either bullied in a workplace or their opinions not being listened to, or a top-down approach where people weren't consulted about decisions being made. So I think it was in that moment of seeing examples of poor leadership where I truly got that light bulb moment of being able to value what good leadership is, and it really made me respect the people that I had seen in my life that had shown that good leadership to me. So, where there was open and inclusive collaboration, and, creating environments where people felt welcome and where people felt that they could share their opinions, but also where people felt listened to and respected. And so that was kind of my light bulb moment in a roundabout way, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. It's like an inverse insight. The second question was something you would do differently if you had the option.
Yeah. So this was also a really good question. And I guess, being, younger in my years in leadership, but something that I looked at in terms of what I would do differently or what would I change, and the word sustainability came to me. And I think this is something that I always strive to do, but something that I often find is really challenging to create in leaderships at times. is that sustainability in what we're producing, whether it's in a project or ministry. And I think it's something that I know personally I've always strived to have that sustainability in those areas. So when you're setting up something for the first time, or when you're taking something over, thinking about how do I make this sustainable? How can it be carried on? And in particular, how can it be carried on beyond your presence? And that's something that I've always strived for, but I know has been difficult, and where I have seen at times where I've left projects and they may have then not continued, and at times when it has been successful and they have sustained. But I think it's something that it goes beyond just my experience when you think about sustainability. I think sustainability is something that in today's current church is a word that we should all be reflecting on and looking at. How do we create leadership that's sustainable, but also a church that's sustainable? And also, how do we keep our faith sustainable as well? So I think when I was reflecting on that going forward, from what you would change in the past going forward, that word sustainability really struck out. And in particular, going into the plenary council, I think it's also something in particular I hope really gets raised within those discussions and going forward is, that sustainability of our church and of our faith, and what we can do in Australia, in all areas of Australia. So, urban and remote, to have that sustainability for everyone.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, it's that step beyond, isn't it? Not thinking about how I can lead, but actually how is this leadership going to work and how is this going to go further? It's the step of thinking of others. So thank you for that. Marg, a light bulb moment in your...
I've got two quick light
Go.
bulb moments.
2 light bulbs are fine.
Are they sustainable light bulbs?
They taught me a lot. I mentioned before people and purpose. The first one was, I was in no leadership position, but it involved people, and it was a lifetime lesson for me. My mother was killed in the Southern Aurora train accident in 1969, and at the time of the accident I happened to be visiting friends in Leeton in Sydney. And it took me all day to realise that Mum had been on that train, because I'd left Brisbane about 5 days before and was not really connected into what train Mum was on. She was on her way to Perth with friends. They were going to a bowling carnival. Anyway, I ended up going to Melbourne, and I ended up in Melbourne about 4 a.m. in the morning. We went to Benalla, from Leeton to Benalla, which was the centre for the accident. In the Benalla police station, they said there's a body awaiting identification in the mortuary in Melbourne. So off we went to Melbourne, and got to Melbourne about 4 a.m. This is 1969. Got to Melbourne about 4 a.m. I was 25, a recently registered nurse. Go to the morgue. They made it very clear that they would stay on duty if I was coming to identify the body. The long and the short of the story was, it wasn't unusual for me to walk into a morgue, I must say that, because my friend's husband was with me and he was nearly fainting being carted in to look at a body. Anyway, it wasn't Mum. The sergeant was not too impressed. He'd waited for me to come, and he thought I was going to be able to say this was Kathleen Mary Vider, and I said that is not Kathleen Mary Vider. And I said, we went back to his office, and I said, could I ring my father in Brisbane, and he knows that I'm coming somewhere to see if I can identify a body. Can I ring my father in Brisbane and let him know that it's not Mum? And in those days, it was not a picking up the phone and you had to go through trunks and make an interstate call and whatever have you. And this sergeant said to me at 4 a.m. in the morning, he said, there's a policy on the wall that says no private phone calls. And I said, sir, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. I don't know Melbourne. I just want to ring my father. It will be reverse charges. You won't be paying for it. And he reluctantly said, okay, and then stood at my shoulder till the exchange put it through to Dad and asked Dad if he'd accept reverse charges, and he said yes. And so then, I thought, I will never, ever treat anybody like that, and I never have. That has been with me forever. The other one was a purpose one, and when I was doing a country term, once again, as a fairly newly registered nurse educator, working in the Taree District Hospital in New South Wales. They were getting all reorganised in the Hunter region, and Taree came into the Hunter region, and there were discussions going on about the restructuring of the health region and the service delivery areas when the changes came in and nursing had all gone into universities. So there was a committee, and it had everybody from all these regional hospitals in it, and I went to Newcastle to these meetings while they were developing these committees and these new structures that were going to come into existence. And I went down and was participating on the committee, as I thought everybody was doing, till we got to the stage one day and I realised they were creating a committee with positions that suited them. And they said to me, well, you can be the whatever. And I said, well, I'm not here designing a job for myself. And they said, well, we are. And I thought, oh, well, I've packed the wrong boat here. I'm out of it. And I said, well, that's not the purpose of this committee. The purpose of this committee was to develop a structure to go forward for this region. If, you know, there's a position on it that suits any one of us, go for it. But we're not creating a committee around us. And I mean, the purpose of the whole exercise was lost as far as I was concerned. That's a lesson I took with me for the rest of my life as well.
Did the committee go ahead?
The committee went ahead. There were much more senior people and more powerful than me.
Okay. So something you would do differently, Mark?
What I would do differently, I think, and I don't know whether this would have been successful, but in the many changes that happened over healthcare and are still happening over healthcare, is many places now are money managers. It's all about the budget. It's really not about the care. And in the 70s, 80s and 90s, systems got introduced that rationalised care on a mathematical model. And we had patient-nurse dependency models, and they still talk about it now. How many nurses they'll employ for so many in aged care or whatever. And I'm sorry that I was not more vocal in sticking up for care. I did it in some arenas, but I was not forceful enough to gather a bigger band around me. We probably wouldn't have won, but it should have been more vocalised because we haven't ended up in the best space.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an insightful, prophetic statement. Thanks, Mark. Anthony, a light bulb moment in your leadership style?
It was interesting. I was struggling to think of a moment until I would listen to Sarah and Marg, and I think that it's more in the experience of poor leadership around you that you think, I'm not going to do that, or I hope I don't do that, or I commit to never doing that. There's been any number of moments of that. Probably if there is a little light bulb moment, and it's more a reflection on growing into leadership yourself. You know, we're all meant to have supervisors these days, and at the last supervision session, there was a little light bulb moment when I was reflecting on my own leadership style and whatever. In a position where, in fact, you've got people immediately above you in the various capacities that I have. You know, I'm not the final arbiter here at the cathedral. I'm not the final arbiter at the seminary and so on. So that creates a different kind of dynamic. But one of the realisations for me, as I spoke with my supervisor, for me personally, in my own style, there's the tension between patience and passivity. The downside for me personally is always that sort of being a bit drawn towards passivity. You know, what can you do? Whereas patience is a different kind of dynamic. Being alert to moments at which things can change, things can move, things can adjust. And you've got to have your own mind, heart and spirit set for those particular moments, whether they arise in a moment or arise gradually. So I think I probably learnt more from bad experiences of leadership and my own moments of bad leadership where, I think I've learnt to trust my instincts and where things go awry are moments where I haven't trusted my instincts. But I think there is something, for me personally anyway, something about the dynamic that I'm aware that, sometimes I can be drawn to passivity. What can we do about this? Where in fact patience is a very different dynamic, and in a world as complex as this, patience isn't just a virtue. I think it's also a necessity, but that doesn't mean doing nothing. It just means being alert to what's happening in the shifts and movements that are going on, and what are the moments that we need to respond.
And I think in the spaces that we're in, that resonates quite deeply, because I think there are changes or shifts that happen quickly. There are others that are never going to happen quickly and perhaps never should. I mean, I belong to a young community, and sometimes we try to tie things down, and you're going to think, well, maybe you just need to let time and to hold your space. Natalia, light bulb moments or moment?
I was thinking on a time where I was on a bus trip after the immersion program during the Leadership for Mission course. This was a few years back, where 12 of us and our lecturer, Dr. Janine, went to visit a group of women scholar, Muslim scholar, in Auburn Mosque. And we were sitting around the table sharing the same things about frustrations, our dreams, and what it's like to be women leaders in an institution that where it's not really the norm, and sharing stories of everyday struggle. There's this one woman that I remember. She shared about how every day she goes to work, trying to stand up for the cause she believes in, the people, but her supervisor isn't very supportive, and she's trying to stand up for the people that she represents, but the supervisor couldn't see it that way. And so she said that in order to make a change, I need to be in it. I can't just throw the paper in the air and say, stuff it, I'm leaving. But I need to be in it. And I think that's where I thought, that's excellent. And that is really the story of my life too. Change starts with me. And I need to be in it to make change. When it's all very often, it's so easy to just walk away. Yeah, but to stuck at it and just persevere. Yeah.
Thank you. And anything you do differently if you could?
I would be more accepting of my style. I would be kinder to myself, I think. I'm in a board where I'm the only woman, and also the more of a junior one. Everybody's far more senior than me. And there are times that I think I look at other people's ways of leading and I envy that, and I wanted to, how could these people glide so easily and look at things this way, and while the things that worked me up, they wouldn't look at. So that's where sometimes the tension mark about should I speak up, and I've got no ally, I feel sometimes, but sometimes I should wait patiently. Anthony said, I have the image, Anthony, while you spoke, like a tiger, like waiting patiently.
That image often comes to mind when people
of patience, not passivity, just waiting for that particular moment where we can sprung on all the more forward. And so I think that's where I think I'll be more comfortable with my own style. This is me, and this is precisely why I'm on the table, to bring the other perspective that others are not bringing.
I think that image of the tiger is going to stay with us all night. Wonderful. So we have one final question for our panelists, but I would just like to flag that then we're going to have a little bit of time for Q&A. You have seen pens and papers on your table. That is because we would love to hand you the mic and have diversity of voices, but we can't do that, so there will be 2 people with mics. But if you have a question, and I would encourage you to question, comment, reflection, whatever, but we will open the space. So have a think, or at least if you already have one, start to write perhaps as we finalise this question, and we will move to Q&A, okay? So the last question is one piece of advice for the younger you. Now, I'm not sure if Sarah and Natalia, I want to give advice to the younger you, or however you want to frame it, but a piece of advice for the room, for the younger you. Sarah.
Yeah, so the advice that I would give to a younger me, it kind of flows nicely on from what Natalia has just spoken about. But on my reflection on the question, I'd like to give advice to the younger me to say to challenge more and to challenge why, and to challenge in particular around gender equality, not only in secular society but also within the church. And to really, I guess when I think about that verse that comes to my mind is there's no Jew nor gentle, nor free nor slave, nor male nor female, we're all one in Christ Jesus. And that message that we're all created equal, and thinking about then for myself to go back and to find those opportunities in daily life and in ministry and in work to really challenge why there's a gender inequality. And as Natalia was saying, you know, you have to be in it to make those changes. And where are there opportunities for our voices to be heard, or platforms where we can create, I guess, close that gap. I know for International Women's Day, they raised, the UN put out saying that gender equality won't be reached for another 100 years. And I guess, you know, like 100 years, that's such a long way away. And that's a global gender equality. So thinking about, well, what does that then look like also in the church to make sure that all voices are heard, not only, you know, from both male and women, but also thinking about other groups in society as well. So, you know, minority groups within the church, how do we make sure that their voices are heard as well? And when we're looking at decision-making platforms, you know, having spaces for all voices to be at the table in that. And I think, the advice I'd give to my younger self is how do we create those opportunities, but to challenge more in those spaces, as well. Because I feel like that's an area that I've wanted to challenge more, but I guess haven't quite figured out how that looks or what that would look like, for my past person. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sarah. Daring to imagine things differently seems to be as well the foundation of what you're saying, not accepting things as they are. Mark, for the younger you?
I struggle with this a bit because, in a way, I've had a dream run. I didn't really apply for any of the positions on boards or anywhere else. You know, I got asked. And so I've been really very blessed. So probably what I'd reflect and say, I probably would spend a bit more time showing gratitude to God. And the other thing, I love the prayer now of John Henry Newman. Teach me, Lord, to be kind and gentle. And sometimes I wish I'd learned that many years ago, because it's a great reflection at the end of a day.
Thank you. Thank you. Anthony?
I would say to my younger self, save every strand of hair. How much younger would you like me to be?
Not answering that question.
No,
Did you have hair when you did senior?
Yes. I had a lovely head of hair. So my sisters said. I think in a self-indulgent way, I tell myself to trust my instincts. In a more expansive sense, in trusting my instincts, they need to be shaped by the needs of those around me and the needs of the world.
Thank you. Well, that is an ongoing theme, though, the trust your own style, trust your own. So I think there's something coming through there about leadership, isn't there, which each one as we are. So thank you. Natalia?
I would tell myself it's okay to be imperfect. Just go for it and take courage. I am still practicing, I'm still learning that. At the moment I'm doing research in the Australian Centre for Philanthropy and Non-Profit Studies, and my topic is around how faith affects giving. And so there's a lot of the theological sides and also the finance side that I'm trying to unpack, and I just was overwhelmed, I think, and I went and cleaned my house, do my dishes, vacuum the floor, just run from it for the fear of wanting to be perfect. So I think I'll tell myself, my younger self and my current self, it's okay to be imperfect and just go for it.
Thank you. So could I just ask, before we open this, and as we're about to open this, could I ask you to express your appreciation for the honesty and the clarity? And just again to frustrate those who are streaming online, I will say I do believe that we're going to be served drinks. So as we move towards questions, you're going to get your glass refilled. Because it is St. Patrick's Day and we merit another glass. As we open this conversation further, so if I could ask, the problem when you work with people, I find, is that you get jobs. So everybody who you see helping are because I work with them. So I'm very grateful that two people here are going to help me. Okay, Peter and Will. I work with them at the seminary. So, Oh, well, that's fair enough, yes. Well, he does other work. So I'm going to give 2 microphones to Peter and to Will, and they'll just kind of keep an eye open, and I will stand from here and look. So if you raise your hand, if you have a question, you can give it to them, or a thought, something to throw into the pot of our conversation. So we'll just have a short, open conversation about this. We do have a second handheld mic. I'm not sure where it's gone. Here we go. Thank you.
Have you got a drink? Do you want some more?
And I'll stand here and use this just so that. Yeah.
You got some more?
So would anybody have a thought or a question or a comment to bring to the space? Macaulay?
This is just to the panel. It's a bit of a broad question, but what do you feel the church can do to strive towards gender equality as a general idea?
Would you like to stay here till Saturday?
But again, yeah, to whoever would like to answer.
Whoever would like to answer.
One of the bits I was going to add in one of my answers was something that not just I would like to see changing. It's not about change as much as it is just a reality of that we need to explore is this whole relationship between ordination and governance. That leadership and governance is tied to ordination, and I think one of the ways in which one of the issues that the church just simply needs to address, whether that questions needs to be explored whether we want to or not. It's that question's coming whether we like it or not. So we might as well explore it in a very deliberative way, a faithful way, but also a creative way. So I think that's one of the issues that really just needs to be addressed.
Can I add to that as well? I've been part of lots of discussions on this, and what I would like to see is the senior decision-making body of the church be made up of men and women. And I've said this for many years. Every year you used to have to write a report that went to Rome. It was a very basic report. It came from Rome and it went back to Rome. It was about Catholic hospitals, and it really had no more than how many males, how many female beds do you have, and it was how many admissions do you have. It was straight out of a 200-year-old census, I think. But you could write comments on the bottom about, and I would always comment and say that the senior governance level of the church needed to be balanced. Nobody would have a board today that was unisex, simply because we think differently. You've all been around board tables, I'm sure, where the discussion is enriched by two different ways of looking at things. And it's an absence when it's not there. So I'm not too worried about the ordination. I'd just change canon law and say you can have 13 cardinals and you can have 13 women. They can come from anywhere. They can come from the kitchen.
The cardinals.
But if they... that they could do as well. So I think that until we can get to that level of involvement, it's going to be a difficult battle. And I say battle because it's just so different, isn't it? It's a different culture.
And for Teguhputri, Pope Francis is suggesting that the people that need to be around the table are the people that are affected by the decision and the decision makers. So,
yeah, just saying that the latest encyclical talks a lot about dialogue, and the people that need to be around the table are the people that are affected by the decisions being made. And he's really talking about particularly the poor and underprivileged. But clearly, they're around the table. It's a gender thing too at times, and big decisions are being made. So I think, just have to broaden that perspective for the church.
And just to add to that, I think there are attempts being made, but it is so vital for that. There are people in the room here who are participating and beginning to be heard on boards and on groups, which up to now there haven't been female voices. I think that's a tough gig. I remember when I was in Rome, I was the only woman in my group. So first they're gracious because the Italians are always gracious, and then I could tell the moment when the penny dropped that I had a brain and that it was actually bringing something to the room. So that only happens in real life, and it wasn't because they were thinking she could. It just had not been an experience. So I think there are things that will happen simply when things happen. But I do think that's essential. Other thoughts? Dan?
You've all spoken about the importance of personal relationships and humanizing the concept of being a leader and the concept of women's leadership, which often we might think of as an abstract. So how do we keep away from the abstract? How do we not perpetuate stereotypes and false binaries in society and in the church? What reflection processes do you have or can you recommend for all of us to employ to not get sucked into that, to check our own blind spots in terms of those, not perpetuating stereotypes?
My experience of not doing that is to look at what you want as a governance, what skills you want to bring around a governance table, and go for that. I don't think you can become too focused on the gender thing. Go for what you will best need for the purpose of the board. What's the board for? And then go for the people. But I don't believe in quotas. I don't think that political 50% here and 50% there is a sensible way, in my opinion. But I go for what the skill mix is that you want and who best has the skills to suit that purpose.
Sarah, were you going to say something there? Did I see you wanting to respond?
Margaret's given a really good answer in terms of what, along similar lines of what I was going to say. But I think that one of the key things there to also add into there is so not, I guess, filling a spot just to say that we have women at the table is, adding the skill set, but also, I guess, and that includes exploring, I guess, where that skill set is coming from as well. So searching for that skill set to, if we're wanting, a gender equality as well as the skill set. So looking at where we can find that and make sure it's present as well. So you have the skill, but you also have the perspective from the gender as well that can be brought to the table.
Thanks, Sarah. Two voices coming through. Diverse voices.
Yeah, so we've got a very conscious baby over here.
That's wonderful. Can I just throw, I'm not really on the panel, but I also find, or one of the ways I'm attempting is to make sure that I do interact with people that I wouldn't usually interact with. So I agree that it's not a question of token, so have we covered, but at the same time, if I never interact with somebody who thinks differently, who has a different experience of their sexuality or a different experience of life, a different experience of church or of non-church, then how am I ever going to hear their voice if I don't? So I do think how we interact and consciously, so where's my blind spot and could I turn towards it rather than ignoring it. And for me, it's blind, so it has to be conscious because it's your blind spot. Other people also have to help you see it. But I think it's tough and necessary.
Good point, mate.
That microphone's not going through the top PA.
Ah, okay. Thank you. Next time I will take the mic off.
Okay.
I would echo that, Maeve. I would add something about listening. I have some friends who were surprised how can a young woman, educated like me, can be a Catholic and remain a Catholic in the midst of all this spotlight that we're under and the limited opportunities for women in leadership in church. And it does come down to a person. The person is Jesus, and that personal encounter, I think, is what keeps me going to with God and also with others. And so it is about connections with people around us, people who we don't normally interact, people who share different stories, and just be a listening ear, I think, to that different experience, so to sensitize us to, I guess, not propagating the stereotype.
I just want to say I'm aware that there's a lot of people in the room, I mean, that also are in leadership and have experiences, so do feel free to share and not just ask if there's anything. And because what I said before wasn't heard, I will just say that I had said a little bit what Natalia had said. This is for those of you who are online, that it is important to make sure that we are engaging with people that we wouldn't normally, so that we can somehow try to at least uncover the blind spots that are natural. We all have a limited experience and circle. Jane.
Thank you. Margaret, you mentioned before that you were blessed with your opportunities. And I often come across particularly women who say to me, I've been lucky, I've been blessed. And I think there's a lot, there's something far deeper than just being blessed and lucky. And I don't know whether it's the imposter syndrome that women seem to carry with them, But I would suggest that you've been more than just blessed and lucky. You've had capability and strength.
Yes. Well, I was lucky insofar as the opportunities that were there for me, I took, and they just led from a variety of things that gave me a very vast horizon at the end of my working life. And certainly there were people that enabled that to happen. And so, in that regard, I was lucky, blessed, whatever. But it was a great journey, because it's a great learning experience to be at that level. It's a big responsibility, but it's a great learning experience. And you have to go and search within yourself. You've got to know yourself very well, because it's a true saying, at the very top it's very lonely, because you walk on your own. You can go and get advice, but there are many things that will stay within your heart. I'll tell you on the light side. In staff development, I used to teach managers in particular not to carry baggage, because I said you'll just get weighed down. If you leave the hospital in the afternoons and you're carrying all the baggage of the day, you'll never sleep. So drop it at the door, and you've got to do it consciously. And I used to do that. I really never took work home. It would have been a very huge incident if I took it home. And when I was announced that I was retiring, there were people that would come knocking on my door, and they would have been from all over the hospital. And they'd want to come in and they'd say to me, I just want to thank you for what you did. I had no idea what they were talking about. I'd long forgotten it. I'd never even remembered. It wasn't even stored in my brain. And they will never know. I'd sit there, and I had learned over many years how to be able to interact and listen, but I had no idea what the incident was that they were coming to thank me for, because I dropped it off. And I couldn't say to them, well, I dropped it off on the day you gave it to me. I wouldn't be any good. I'd say,
so when you're answering, if you could make sure you turn on the microphones. And I would just say, and I think that's absolutely right, but I do think, Jane, what you're picking up on is the undercurrent behind a few of the statements about trust yourself. Trust yourself, trust your instinct, trust, like for me, that's the only way I know how to counter the imposter syndrome when it's you've got this, it's trust your gut instinct. You could get it wrong, but so could somebody else. So just do what you. So I think that is latent in the room, and it's definitely latent in my experience of leadership, without a doubt. Question?
Or thought? Yes. More just a comment. Thanks, Maeve. So, as Maeve mentioned, several years ago, Archbishop Coleridge in this archdiocese did invite a woman onto each of the three, what would be seen, I suppose, as the key leadership priest groups, you know, the Episcopal Council, the Council of Priests and the College of Consultors. And it's now a situation in the archdiocese where there's 2 women on each of those groups. And yeah, I'm one of them, I'm one of those groups. So what I've felt through there has been that burden of some responsibility of, if you muck this up, then that's going to, you know, be a problem down the track. This is an experiment, and, you know, there's the possibility that they'll turn around and go, well, we're not going to do that again. But I've been really heartened by listening, and Maeve, just picking up what you said there, but Natalia, I think, mentioned it first, of to be yourself and to have some confidence that the women who are there, we've been chosen for who we are, and that's what we need to do, is just trust God, and that we have been placed there and be guided by His Spirit, and yeah. So thank you.
Amen.
And Maeve, is this on now?
Yes, it is. Yes. Am I right?
I think the other thing you need to be able to do is recognise when you need to lead from behind and lead from in front. And there are situations where you need to choose where you're required at that particular time. And leading from behind is very often when you are nurturing younger staff, junior staff. You've got to let them go, and but you're there. But you're not leading them, you're behind them in that stage. They know where to go, but they've got to blaze the trail, really, on their own, but you will be there. And then there are other times when it would be very inappropriate and most unfair to leave them leaderless. And that's when you need to be there. And you recognise when you need to be in either situation.
And it seems to me, when I listen to Morgan, I think of the nursing area that has had so much female leadership and such, like that it's light years ahead of where we are in this kind of attempt. It heartens me to sense that there's a connectedness around what's happening in the Archdiocese. So the women who are being placed there tend to get together, tend to think about how that, and I would love to see us, one of the fruits that I'd love to see from this is that we envision together, because you're not just only experimenting, I mean the Archdiocese is, and there's other dioceses behind that, and so how do we do this well? And I think that's a shared task, not just of the women in the room, but the men and women in the room. We need to seek, we need to think, we could suggest, there's lots of things that we could do, and I think that would be received if we were intelligent about it, which we always are. We probably have time for about one more, and then I'm going to ask somebody to give thanks. Colleen.
I just wanted to ask if anyone had any advice on, or your view on the importance of mentoring. Thank you.
Thanks, Colleen. Would any of the... Natalia?
I'm always looking for mentors.
And I mentor quite a few people.
We could get together.
Can you mentor you?
You could, but one of you turn off your mics.
Funny the way she always runs to me.
You were going to.
I can be your mentee. Yes, for me, it is really important, and to have it in my family, I think it's one, but also in my workplace. What my experience is that sometimes mentor is not perfect too. So if I attach myself and my sense of learning too much into one, and there are areas that is not the standard that I strive for, then I would be disappointed. So I think to have the balance that yes, mentor helps me, but I also help myself, and just have that innate confidence that he or she could teach me something, but it's ultimately my decision, my context, and my call to decide.
Can I jump in?
Of course you can, Sarah.
I think the concept of mentoring is really critical, especially from, a younger female within the church, but also professionally. And I think in particular for when you look at, I guess, the population of the church and I guess the generation that I'm in, there's, I guess, a lot less people in the church for my generation, but also thinking about mentoring, I think that that's such a powerful way that we can provide support to either young people or all people within the faith journey, so that they know that they're supported, but also know that they're not alone. I think that's one of the valuable things that I got from going to Australian Catholic Youth Festivals and other ministry events where young people come together, and the Leadership for Mission program, which was fantastic to have the support of 12 other females around you as peer mentors, but then also hearing from female lecturers that gave you such inspiring ways of understanding the faith and nourishing you and in that journey. So I think mentoring is something that is really valuable and something that should be a part of, everyone should really seek out mentors in that aspect as well.
And I'd just like to add that naturally, I mean, we did intentionally try to create a community with the grad cert, which developed its own life, but that naturally then continued. They have kept a community feeling, they continue supporting one another. So it's a beautiful sense that if you do create that space and it continues, it's much easier to take up those opportunities that Marg was telling us about, which will come your way, I have no doubt, our way. So thank you. I think probably we will need to leave it there. I would like to call on Natalia, if you don't mind, just to give a vote of thanks, and then we will finish with a song and say goodbye. But first, a vote of thanks by Natalie, my friend and colleague. Thank you.
We have been so fortunate to have this opportunity and to listen to the wisdom that has been so graciously and generously shared from the floor, but particularly from our panellists and our MC this evening. We began in a posture that was at once theological, liturgical, musical and prayerful. In the name of the mother, the name of her child, the name of the living breath, hidden God with us, loving God in us, boundless God forever. Anthony, thank you for sharing with us your joint gifts of humility and humour. There is a depth to the wisdom that you shared with us in so many ways. I will remember, of course, that great line, your volunteering to mute the microphone until asked. And we might say on an evening like tonight, as the only man and as the only ordained member of the panel tonight, that there is an obvious point at which that voluntary action is welcome and received, but it also served to me, and I'm sure to many others in this room, of the requirement that is that belongs to all of us to check our privilege. And even as we look around this room tonight, we might consider for ourselves who is present and who is absent, and why that might be. Which voices were present and absent, and why might that be? I was grateful especially for the nuance you pointed out between patience and passivity. And also of the encouragement to inquire about the relationship between leadership, governance and ordination. Sarah, thank you for being present with us through the internet. It's a tricky thing to do when there's so many of us here in one place, but in being part of the panel via Zoom, you reminded us of all of the other people that are gathered with us via the internet and via Zoom, that we are present here together. But it was good to be reminded of the circles of women and men all around that are with us and that are thinking with us and reflecting with us tonight, including that tiny, beautiful little voice. I don't know if you could hear it over online or over there, but there was an audible gasp and sigh in this room when we heard your beautiful daughter. But Sarah, you brought so much to this discussion about the instructive possibility of negative experiences of leadership. Something that Elizabeth Johnson or perhaps Edward Chillibex might talk to us in theological terms about negative contrast experiences. You challenged us to think about the sustainability of how our leadership might continue. How is this project, this experience, and even my leadership sustainable? You reminded us of the richness and the resources that are available to us should we choose to practice in interdisciplinary style. And thank you again for modelling for us the importance of privileging Indigenous voices through your reference to Auntie Miriam Rose and Dadiri. That deep listening is a learning. We are still on the path to learn and continue to learn. Margaret, thank you so much for your encouragement. For your encouragement to take up the opportunities that come to us. For your encouragement to take up those opportunities with the caveat that we must do so knowing ourselves and knowing the models of leadership with which we are comfortable. Person-centred leadership, servant leadership, but not subservient leadership. Again, the difference and the nuance that is present in the wisdom that you shared with us. And Natalia. From the beginning, you introduced yourself to us through your relationships and your significant relationships as a sister, as a child, and also as a migrant. That context is so important. I will certainly take away from this evening those fantastic stories you told us of your grandmother on the way to the shops, needing to stop so many times, to connect, to remember, to ask after so many in her community, and of her feisty persistence in getting the internet working. Tomorrow at work, I may even remind myself to keep saying, I am frustrated, but we're going to work together and we're going to get this done. To make change, I need to be in it. And also your advice to yourself, the importance of self-acceptance, especially when we don't see examples of our own style of leadership represented around us. It's okay to be imperfect. Just go for it. Thank you to each of you and all of you here and present virtually for making this evening so rich.
Thank you, Natalie. We do have, and actually I'm going to make an executive, we do have a small gift for each of you, but rather than parade in and out, we might give it to you later. I would, while we're giving thanks, also like to thank our musicians, Wayne and Macaulay. And if you'd like to come up now, because we are going to finish with a piece of music, just to round it off, and to Dan for singing with me. I'd also, if that's okay, like to thank Mel. Mel is my personal assistant and a student, and this would not have happened without her in the background. And also Jessica and Marie-Claire from our faculty, who aren't on site, but the online and here would not have happened without them. And as well Luke and his team, who are working hard at the back of the room and have worked hard in these days to make sure that we could stream. So all of you, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. These spaces for me are life-giving. I hope they are for you. We'll sing out with a song that some of you do know. It's a song based on John 4, the Samaritan woman. As understood, interpreted and explained through the lens of Sandra Schneider's theology, I think it speaks for itself. Yeah.
Who said you could go?
I am only you knew. You interrupt her and she interrupts you right back. You were tired, it was the 6th hour, the time and the place for eternity, life to make sense, the right kind of space for a scene. What is she doing here? Rabbi, you've got to eat. How dare you speak to me? How dare you cross the line that was drawn and still drawn? Give me something to drink. I am tired. It is the 6th hour, 'cause I am. You are nameless, claimless still. Believe me that you are. Shameless, claimless, only you knew. You have no bucket, she cut through the small talk and called you to honor an overdue covenant. One of those conversations that mark a world, one of those rare occasions where time stands still, and the truth that was claimed as she claimed, now the home could collide. She's more than a match for your mind. She can find her way through all the clues to your truth and your power. For now is the hour of I am. You are nameless, claimless still. Believe me that you are. Shameless, faceless, if only you knew, if only you knew, if only you knew, if only you knew, if only you knew.